welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at setting up some dimensions in AutoCAD for some of the standard stuff that you're going to use. I'm going to try to accomplish in this video on showing you a method that will stop you from having to constantly select the dimensions that you want to do. And once we get to that, I'll show you what I mean. We're going to start off with this extrusion that we did in a previous video, so I'm going to link that up here in the description or at the top, and we're going to see if we can use this to demonstrate how I want to do dimensions. If you can remember, on this one we use millimeters, and I'm going to have my dimension display both millimeters and inches. Okay, so here we are in Inventor. It's already opened up and we created the simple extrusion. And you can remember that the height of this was 35 millimeters. Now the next thing we need to do is go ahead and save this. So I'm just going to click on the save icon. And then I'm going to place it in one of my workspaces and where I want this to be. Once you have it in the location that you would like, go ahead and name it. And for my example, I just went ahead and named it Exercise 1. And I'll click on the save icon. This is just telling me that it's not in the proper save location or where it's linked to according to the project. In this case, it's going to be fine, but usually I'll go back and I'll make sure that it is one of the workspaces that's added into my project. So go ahead and select yes to that, and you can see here at the bottom that your project is saved. So I have my part saved. Next thing I want to do is create a drawing. So I'm going to select this new icon. I'm going to go to the English US and I'm going to use the standard. This is the standard that we set up by using the template video that I put out before. So you can go ahead and go back to that video and you can see how I was able to set up a title block that I'm going to use to create this one. So I'm going to go to the standard one and then I'll select create. It should open up with the default template or default border and title block. I'm just going to go ahead and remove both of those. So I'm just going to select this one and I'll hold down the control button and select my other one, right click and delete them. Next thing I'm going to do is it says sheet 1, do a right click on it, select edit sheet, and then change this to a B-size drawing. Underneath your drawing resources, underneath border, remember we made one that was called B-size. If I double click that, that should enter or display into my screen. And then underneath the title block one, I have one that's called title. So I'll double click on that one. And it's going to ask me for some simple stuff that I'm going to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in my name. And this project should be Exercise 1. The scale I don't know yet since I haven't brought the part into my drawing, and I'll select OK. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring in the view that I want. So I'm going to select base, and by default it's going to pull in whatever drawing that I have open. So if I have multiple ones open, it's going to usually pull up the last one that I had displayed. But if I had other ones, I could select this drop down, and from here I'm able to select other things. Or if it's a drawing that's actually closed, you can select the open icon and go and search for it. Okay, so I have this one on my screen. I'm just going to move it. Now you can see that if you come to the border of your part, just where the dotted area is, that's where I'm going to left click and hold, and I'm just going to drag this to a location that I want it at. Now I'm able to put in my other views. I'm just going to click one above on the top of it. And then I'm just going to make an isometric here in the corner. I'll hit the OK button. And AutoCAD should draw those in for me. I'm sorry, Inventor should draw those in for me. Now you can see that the size of these are a little bit small. I'm going to double click on this one. So you can see that I have the border highlighted around it. And when I double click on it, it should open up. And these little pull handles on the side can be sometimes beneficial to you. they will go to the next proper size that Inventor has listed for it. But if that's a little bit too big for you, and I'll hit the OK button just to see that it will update this view and this view as they are in line with each other. Your isometric views can be different from your main view, so that's why this one did not scale up. But as I was saying before, sometimes this might be a little too big or not quite the scale that you want it at. I'm just going to double click on that border again, or this view. And then I'm going to select this one, and it looks like 1.5 would be probably really ideal for what I want this to be. And I'll select OK. Now this is not a normal size, so I don't have to put in a scale per se. I can use the not to scale, but I will put in a scale since I know exactly what it is. So over here underneath my sheet 1, underneath title, where it says field text, if I double click on that, underneath my scale I can type in 1.5 is equal to 1. Okay, so now my scale has filled in, and you can also see my date has filled in. This date is a little bit smaller than the other text. I'll show you how to go ahead and edit that towards the end of this video. Okay, so what I want to do next is that my isometric, usually most people like those to stand out. What I mean by that is if it has any kind of material assigned to it, they want that material displayed. So if I double click on this view, I should get the edit to come up. And then I'm just going to select this icon where it's shaded. Select OK, and you can see that this one is shaded. Now I'm ready to start putting my dimensions on this drawing. First thing that you're going to do is switch over to the Annotate tab. And once I select dimension, underneath this drop down it's going to have what format that I'm using. So I can use the standard, and then I have some of these other ones if I want to use them. I want the one that has the millimeters and the inches displayed, so you can see where it says default millimeters, inches, the ANSI one. So if I select that one, and I'm just going to select this whole entire line, and then I'm just going to pull this dimension back. Okay, so with this one, what's going on right now is that the edit is coming up. And what happens is every time you create a dimension, it's going to give you the option to edit. So if I want to change something or do some of that nature to it, I'll have that option. If you don't want that to show up every single time, you can just select this little button here, and that's going to turn that off. So anytime you create a dimension, it's not going to give you the edit option. And now when I create another dimension, and let's go ahead and create a dimension from this edge to this edge, you'll see that it's ready to go to the next step. So it will speed up your computer a little bit depending on what your specs are on it. Okay, so I have these dimensions and I don't quite like the way that they look. And if I escape out of the dimension command, and if I use a dimension now, you're going to see that the default one goes right back to the one that where it just has the inches. Well, I don't want that to be my default. So I'm going to show you how to go ahead and change that. And then that change will be available for you for the future as well. So I'll make sure that I'll show you how to export that. Okay, so I'll go ahead and delete this dimension. And I'll switch over to the Manage tab. And then I'll go to the Style Editor. Okay, once Inventor load up your Style Editor, you should get a dialog box that appears like this. The standard or default that I'm using, or that Inventor is using from just right out of the box, is going to be this one. Let's go ahead and take a look and see how we can manipulate this so we don't have to constantly keep changing things back and forth. So underneath the View Preference tab here, this just shows you some of the basic stuff that you'll see when you bring in some scales, or you're going to do some sections or things of that nature, or even threads. It also tells you what angle projection that you're in. So remember that if you're in the United States or you're using the ANSI standards, you're going to be using the third angle projection. If you're using an international, there's your first angle projection. The next one is the available styles. And if I click on the dimension one, you'll notice that in that drop down when I was looking at my dimensions, I had all of these ones available to me. Let's go to the object defaults, and this is where you're going to be able to change things at. So underneath my object defaults, I'll select the pencil, and that's going to give me the edit icon. And what I like to do is I like to change all of the dimensions that are linear over to what I want it to be. So for example, I'm going to go with the baseline one, and I'm going to make that the inches, my chain dimension, diameter, the linear, and I will leave my ordinate dimensions and my radial dimensions as the last one. So I just selected and I set all of these to my default millimeter, inches, ANSI. Now one thing you want to try to do is avoid trying to hit this button here, because if you do, it's going to close this whole box. It'll save it for you, but then you're going to have to select that button again to come back and make the other changes. So what I like to do is I'll hit the save button here, and that's going to lock it into my default, so how I want my dimensions to be. The next thing I need to do is control how that dimension is going to look. So underneath this dimension tab, I selected the default millimeter, inches one. Starting at the units, you can have it where it displays all the units, and right now it has the trailing zeros that will be displayed. I'm just going to uncheck that so I don't see those. Next one I'll go to is the alternate units tab, and this is going to tell me how I want my units to be displayed. So in that case, do I want them side by side, or do I want those dimensions to be stacked? In this case, I'm going to select the stacked icon. Underneath the display, this just tells me how I want my dimensions to look, basic offset and things of that nature. I'm going to leave that how it is. Underneath my text, this is going to tell me, do I want my dimensions to stay in line as the way that they are now, or when they're vertical, do I want them to go vertical? In this case, I'm going to make everything and keep them all horizontal. So I'm just changing these three boxes. Underneath my primary units, my primary text, I can change the size of these, and these are driven by the note text. So if you have a standard note text height that you want to adjust, you can select this pencil icon here, and it's asking me to hit the save button. So once I hit the yes, it's going to automatically jump down to it. And then from here, I can go ahead and make it that text height. Remember not to hit the save and close here, but hit this save. And then I'll come back to that dimension, which is here. Okay, and that was the exact same thing as me hitting the pencil. It jumped down to the note text, and I was able to adjust the text height. The rest of this stuff really doesn't apply since we're not doing any tolerancing or anything on this one. And I did forget to show you one other thing over there in the note text. So go back to the text. You can see that it did update some of my text, and you can see that it is staggered. So I'm going to go back to where it says note text, and then I'm going to change the justifications of them to be middle centered. Once I hit save on this one, now it's looking more traditional, or how you want it to look. Okay, and I think I did want to take off the trailing zeros, so remember that's underneath the units. And if you uncheck this box, it's controlled by my default settings here, so I'll go and uncheck it from there. Okay, it did go off. Okay, so I didn't have to go back to it, but it is listed under here as well. Let me go ahead and save this. Now everything is set the way I like it. So the last thing I want to do is that if it's something that I really like this layout and this style the way I want it, I will come to the standard one. I would do a right click on it, and I would export this. Now I would export this usually wherever I save or I keep a lot of my stuff that I usually use. So I'm going to name this one just the same name as I named this one. This was an example that I did earlier, but I just named it DIM millimeter underscore inches, and then the end of it is going to be the style definition. So once you go ahead and save it there, and this is going to ask me, do I want to replace it? It's going to be there for you to use in the future. So if you want to bring that one in, for example, you can always select where it says import, and bring in that style so you don't have to go through all this again. So it's a real convenience to you if you set this up the way you like it and then utilize this style over and over again. Okay, and the way I know that I'm done with this, I always like to keep this dimension or a dimension as an example to the side. So when I save it, you will see that it updates those dimensions the way I like it. Now I can go ahead and close this, and let's go ahead and finish dimensioning our drawings. Okay, some of the things that I like to do when I dimension, and I'll switch back to the Annotate tab, is that if it's a dimension that's going to be on the inside, meaning that I'm going to dimension this line, and I'll go ahead and place this dimension. If I dimension this one, you're going to see that it's going to overlap and I'm going to lose that gap here. And that's one of the things that I try to avoid, and it's just one of those common drafting things that you usually pick up. So you want that gap in between all of your stuff. So as you're doing these dimensions, make sure that if it's got a gap in between it, go ahead and dimension in between them that way. And then another thing is to try to keep these lined up. Now sometimes, although I have it lined up here, you can see that it still won't line up. Just come back to it, grab that dimension, and when you do it the second time, it tends to line up. Okay, and I'll go ahead and put one more dimension onto this one. And you could have used the chain dimension as well. So if you want to play around with that one, go ahead, and that's going to do the exact same thing that I'm doing here. And I'll show you that one in another video. So I'm just carrying on and finishing my dimensions as you see here. So I like to make sure everything is in line. I'll go ahead and do my dimension here. And I'll dimension the entire line on this one. And then on the second one, I'm going to dimension from here to that point, because if I try to dimension and grab that line, that's why I'm going to wind up getting that covering that gap for me. Okay, and I think this is about all the dimensions that I need. I see one more. Okay, these are all the dimensions that I should need to define this one. And once again, now the last thing I do is that I check and I see my title block does have this text that's a little bit smaller. We can easily fix that if we go to the title block over here underneath sheet 1, and you can do it here or you can do it the one in the drawing. I prefer to keep everything done that's in my sheet. So I'm just going to right click, edit definition. It's going to bring back open when I created this. Double click on where it says creation date. And now you wait a little bit for the dialog box to appear. Select it. Make sure it's all highlighted. And then in this box, I'm going to put in 0.1875. Okay. Finish the sketch. And then once I click yes, it should update that. Now, if that's doing that over and over again, I constantly have to do that. It's probably easier for you to go back to your template and redefine this. And then that'll fix that problem permanently. Okay, so hopefully this concludes everything that you would like to know on dimensioning. And we're going to be doing some more of this in some of the other examples. I want to thank you again for watching this, and I'll see you in the next video.